There you are. Okay. So we can go ahead and get started. I'm just letting everybody know that we are taping this so that we can have it for future use for other agents to review. Before I start, does anybody else have any other questions or any contract issues they would like to bring up and ask about? Okay, so we will get started. So I'm in the MLS looking for a property that I'm interested in writing an offer on. I find the property. I see it here, and I go to the Make Offer button, which will take me into Zip Form. It automatically is linked to your Zip Forms, and it will pull you in there. It takes a second. So the nice thing about using the MLS link is that it's supposed to pull in all the information for the property. So you can see now we have a summary sheet, and it pulled in the MLS number, the street address, various information, the parcel number. I'm going to go ahead and start filling in this front sheet because this will be data for the offer. So the offer is being made today. The expiration date is tomorrow. The purchase price is going to be $1,080,000. Initial deposit is 3%. Always work to get 3% for your initial deposit. The reason is that means that your buyer has skin in the game, and it means that they're committed to making this work. And I had a question earlier this week about, even if it's an FHA deal, do you put in the 3%? And my answer is yes, you do. So I'm going down on the form and just putting in the more important information, which was our purchase price, our total amount financed. I'm going to put $762. Then we can go over here and we can add parties to the transaction. So the first party we're going to add is the buyer. And tour. Buyer number 1. So down here under signing representative, this would be in case you had a trust. So let's say up front, the buyer number 1 was the Gilbert Parisi Trust. Then down here, we would use Gilbert Parisi's name and email as the trustee signing onto the transaction. Buyer number 2. So here you should click this box, save as a contact. That way they will be in your zip forms if you do end up doing multiple transactions with someone. Now I'm going over here to the sell side and I'm going to put in seller number 1. Now, normally I would have the MLS printout in front of me and I would take the information off of that. I wrote down some notes earlier. So this is the Hammer Trust. And down here, I'm going to put Sal Hammer and comma TTEE. TTEE is the abbreviation for trustee. So he is the trustee for the seller. Now we're going to go back to our list and start working on the file. If my computer will cooperate. Come on, computer. I don't know why it's doing this. Please work. There we go. Patience. We all want everything to happen so quickly. And happen at all. Come on. Come on, baby. You can do this. There it goes. Got to give it a chance to catch up. There we go. All right. Excuse me. Okay, now we're going to go to all forms.
Я знаю, почему у меня изо рта вчера пахло плохо.
Чего?
Чеснок. Изо рта плохо.
So we have our cover sheet, which is going to have various data about the file, information that was already filled in, so you can see that the all the property address and all that information was filled in. So you have to really go down and do a double check. So we have the offer date and the offer date is today. The expiration, excuse me, is tomorrow. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock. It's a single family residence. For escrow, I'm in a competitive offer situation. There's 3 other offers. So I'm not going to be naming an escrow. I'm asking the seller to pick the escrow. Same with title. But you are welcome to talk to your client when you're working with the buyer. If they have a preferred escrow or title company, or if you have a company that you work with, you are certainly, you can certainly put that in and let them counter it out. But I'm trying to keep this as clean as possible so that I can get put to the top of the pile. So I filled out the cover sheet, we filled out the front page. Now I have a template set up. So I'm going to go to the template and I'm going to apply the template. So that will have some other information filled in. So now we're going to go right to the offer and take a look at it. So your first document in your offer, so keep in mind if you're a new agent, when you pull up the residential purchase agreement, all the main documents that you need will come into the file. So your first document is your agency agreement, which specifies the definition of a seller's agent, a buyer's agent, and a dual agent. Keep in mind that a dual agent is when you represent a buyer and a seller, and it also is when it's in the same office. So for example, Chloe just opened up escrow with one of the agents in our office. So she is now in a dual agency with Michelle Singerman from our office. The seller's brokerage is Keller Williams Pacific States. Broker number. Always fill in these when you're doing your offer so that your offer looks complete when it's going to the other side. Often another agent will look at how complete you do your offer and feel like, oh, this person's got his act together. When I get something that other agents don't fill in, I feel like they're lazy. So it takes a few extra minutes to get the information, have it, pull it from the MLS, have it ready, and just make sure it's all filled in. 1427142. So the property address, that should have populated. I don't know why it didn't populate, so let's put it in. So you see the MLS found the address and they verified it, so that's good. Filled in the property address and the zip code, etc. Now we're going to date prepared today. Again, the parcel number should have filled in automatically, but it didn't. So we're going to have to, I'm going to have to go back and get that. The purchase price is $1,080,000. I'm going to go back to our cover sheet and find out why we're missing information. Okay, so there's a message back here on my screen saying that I'm currently modifying a purchase template. It's telling me to click here if I want to create a new purchase transaction. So I'm going to click there. What I was doing was modifying my template. So let's see what happens. The speed of light. So it's asking me now to set up a new purchase. I'm going to go back to that file. Oh, okay, I got to start over again. Let's see what we have here. Okay. I am going to go back to my templates. I'm going to apply my template, which is a basic purchase template. Now it says I'm currently modifying a purchase template. So I'm going to say, okay, because what I'm going to do is make this a template for that buyer. Because I'm going to be putting in offers for this buyer on other properties, I believe, in case we don't get this one, I'm setting up a template for them. So that way I have a template just for this client. So if you have a buyer that you're working with and you're doing multiple offers, you can set up a template for them. So when we're done with this, we're going to save it and it will ask us to rename it. I'm going back into the MLS because I need the parcel number. 149009001. So here's where I got the parcel number right here. In a tidbit, when you click on the parcel number, that's where you can find the owner's information and verify that you have the owner. So I see here that it's the Hammer Trust and Sal Hammer. So I am making an assumption that Sal Hammer is a trustee of the Hammer Trust. When you go down below on this property profile, you will see that the property transferred from John Hernandez to the Hammer Trust. Then it went back to Sal, and then back to the trust. So it went back and forth a few times. The reason for that probably was they were doing some financing. When you're refinancing, you have to put the house back in your name and then put it back in the trust. So we're back into the purchase agreement. I'm going to fill in the parcel number. We have both brokers' names, our broker numbers are our numbers. 32,400 is 3% of the price. First loan of 765. A lot of times people, I have 324,000, so it should be one less zero. A lot of times agents think that the balance of the down payment, 280.25, should go here under increased deposit, and that's not the case. The balance of deposit automatically defaults to this line. Once you put in your loan amount, it'll subtract the EMD, and then it'll subtract it from the purchase price. So that means the balance that the client has to bring to the sale is 282,600. So when we go into the next section, this is where we talk about our contingency periods. The first one is not a contingency, but the first part of delivering the offer. So verification of down payment, you should always have this attached, and you should always have proof of funds from your buyer to present with your offer. So a lot of times I get a question, do I have to show the account that the money's coming out of because it's coming from many different accounts? And the answer is no. For example, with this client, I'm just going to show one of their IRA accounts. That's not where they're pulling the money from, but it's just simpler to show that because it shows that they have more than enough money for a down payment. Also, when you're doing your transaction, hit the save button while you're going through it, because that'll save it if your computer freezes up like mine does once in a while. The next section is our appraisal contingency period. I am going to put that at 14 days. I shortened it just a couple days to be a little more competitive, but things are tight right now, and financing and lenders are taking longer than we would hope, unfortunately, because they're so backed up. So the next is loan application. So the normal contract defaults to 3 days. I'm going to give a pre-approval. So then I'm going to check the box letter attached because we've already have a pre-approval and they've already applied. Then the loan contingency removal, it defaults to 21 days. And in today's market right now, I'm going to leave that at 21 days. That way I don't have to go back and ask for an extension. Then as we get to the next section, here's where you're going to put in if you have anything that's out of the usual. I am going to add in the car form for COVID, and we'll go through that when we get there. It automatically defaults to buyer inspection advisory, so that's part of the contract. In here would be, you would put a trust advisory if your buyer was a trust. If it was a anything you want to put on an addendum, you would click this box and write addendum number 1. I'm going to put in other terms right here and see if it'll fit. I'm going to come back and write that because I have to think about it. You'll see when I write it. Next section is allocation of cost, inspection reports, and certificates. So on the other form, we had put seller's choice for natural hazard disclosure. I highly recommend checking the box environmental. A lot of listing agents don't get it, but it's only about $15 more, and it gives your buyer more information, especially important for hillside properties. The next section is City of Los Angeles 9A report. So this property is in Whittier, so I don't put that in there, but I highly recommend putting that in because in South LA, we tend to get agents that are from out of the area sometimes that are selling properties, like maybe they're from Orange County, and they don't understand some of the things that they have to do. So you have to remind them. Escrow will order the 9A report, but once you put it in the contract, they have to do it. So Department of DWP clearance, actually, I'm going to take that out too because we're not in Department of Water and Power in New Whittier. So we get rid of that, get rid of that. So the next section is government requirements and retrofit. The first one is your basic one, smoke alarm, carbon monoxide, and water heater bracing. The seller, that's typically the seller's responsibility. Number two, the seller shall pay for the cost of compliance with any other minimum mandatory government inspections if required as a condition. So a mandatory government inspection, for example, would be the City of Inglewood pre-sale report, the City of Compton report. So that would be an inspection by the government. Whittier does not have that, so I'm going to take that off. Then the next box is seller to pay for the cost of compliance with any other minimum mandatory government retrofit requirements. So that could be a gas shutoff valve, something like that. I'm going to keep that box. Under escrow and title, I typically put each pay own cost. That way, if your client can negotiate a better deal with escrow, they might get a better deal. Let's say, for example, they're a flipper who flips a lot of properties, then they often have a deal with their particular escrow. And then the same with title, I put seller's choice. The next section is other costs, and these are traditionally paid by the buyer or seller or both. So under other costs, I'm going to put seller shall pay the county transfer tax. Seller shall pay the city transfer tax. If there's an HOA fee, a transfer fee, or HOA docs, those would be in these next sections. And again, that would be a seller paid cost. The next section is home warranty. And we have, I'm putting in $550, buyer's choice, upgraded. They have air conditioning. They do not have a pool or spa. And we're going to do limited roof coverage and with Preferred Plus. The only time I would recommend waiving the home warranty is if you're doing like a flip property where the investor is buying it and he's going to flip it, because our insurance on a yearly basis asks how many homes did we not get a home warranty for. So it is something that we have to monitor. The next section are items that are included and excluded from the sale. So we're going to say that the stove's included, the fridge, and the washer and dryer, and there's a wine fridge. Then here we would put if there's something that's excluded from the sale, and there's nothing that I can think of offhand. I'll go back and review the MLS to make sure. Then this section here is brackets attached to walls, floors, ceilings, or other such components shall remain with the property or shall be removed, and holes and other damage shall be repaired. I'm going to say removed and repaired. Next section is buyer does intend to occupy the property. Again, that's very important for your lender. If you click does not intend, then that means they're an investor and they're not getting a primary residence loan. Under seller occupied property, the possession shall be delivered to buyer at 6 p.m. on the date of close of escrow. So I just leave it standard for that, but I have seen agents in our office put earlier times, but typically the buyer gets possession when the property records. If the seller were to remain in possession, this paragraph would pertain, and typically you want the sellers to remain in possession 29 days or less for a simpler transaction if that is the need. And the reason is when you go 30 days or more, you're doing a full-blown lease agreement with the seller. With 29 days or less, you're doing a seller in possession, which is a much simpler form. If the house was tenant occupied and the tenant was going to stay with the property, you would check this box here. You can see as we go through the form, it's pretty much plug and play. You can see the boxes that you need to fill in. And I'm really gearing this more to new agents to let you know. Then this next section is an important section. 14 relates to time periods. Basically your physical inspection period. That also includes reviewing HOA documents, any reports relative to the property, any inspections. If you want to do a sewer inspection, or if you want to do a roof inspection, if you want to do any type of inspection, you want to do it during this period. The contract defaults to 17 days. I'm going to ask for 14 days. If you're in a super competitive, you may want to shorten that, but I think I'm reasonable here. So this clause here says the buyer shall have access to the property for 17 days after acceptance or not, whether or not the buyer has removed his inspection contingency. So basically, sometimes sellers hold back and say you can't come back in the house after you've removed an inspection contingency. You get it for 17 days, whether you've removed it or not. So if a seller is refusing access to your buyer, then it becomes a notice to perform situation. And that takes us to the next section, notice to buyer or seller to perform. Now, I'm going to put in here and be aggressive and put 5 days. And the reason I'm doing that is if you have a problem and you need extra time, that means the seller has to give you 5 days to perform. So let's say your loan is delayed a little bit and you need some extra time. They can give me a notice to perform, and then I get 5 extra days to deal with things. And that's really only needed when you're in a situation where you're not getting good cooperation on the other side. But 5 days can make a difference. The notice to perform cannot end on a Sunday or a holiday. So let's say it was going to end on this Sunday, then it gets extended to the next day, Monday. Here, so you go through a notice to perform period where the seller has said you haven't performed, then they have to give you a notice to close escrow. So again, that's a 3-day. You could put 5 there, but I'm going to leave it at 3. Final verification of condition of the property. This is where the buyer can go through the property and review to make sure that repairs were done, that the property is the same as it was when they put their offer in. The ideal situation is to do a verification of the property when the homeowners have moved out. So sometimes 5 days before is too soon. It might be a couple days before, but I highly recommend do your walkthrough prior to funding your loan when you're at your closing. Let the client walk through the house to see the condition that it's in and double check that repairs have been made. Now, with regard to repairs, the home inspector that I've used for approximately 15 years now has a program where if you pay extra as part of his inspection, he will go back out to the property to verify that the repairs have been made. And I just had that happen over the summer where one of my clients used it. And sure enough, he went out. There was a number of like minor kind of repairs, but that weren't completed. And these were things that were in the attic and underneath the house where you and your buyer and me, we're not going to climb up in the attic or go into the house. So it's a really nice extra service that he is offering with his home inspections. If anybody needs a referral, please let me know. Remember that your compensation is always negotiable. It can be paid by either side. I'm in a transaction right now where the buyer is actually paying part of the compensation to the listing broker. And the reason for that was they needed a lower price for a certain reason. So they were able to get the listing broker to lower their commission and then pay that listing broker a commission. So it then becomes an expense to the buyer, which the buyer can write off, and they got the lower price, which they needed for tax reasons. Down here, this clause, you would just let it default to 3 days. That means that you're going to get a copy of this purchase agreement once it's signed to escrow holder within 3 days. Ideally, you want to get it into escrow within 24 hours because the clock starts ticking for everybody and you want escrow to have it as soon as possible. When we get to 21 and 22, these are related to liquidated damages, which takes us back to why we want our buyer to put 3% in. The buyer, if the buyer goes completely through escrow and they've removed all their contingencies and they get to the last day of escrow and they say, I don't want to close, they are exposed to 3% of the purchase price. So if that money is already in escrow, it makes things a lot simpler for closing the escrow out. Now, I've never had this happen in my career except once, but I represented the seller and the buyer wanted out. Now, keep in mind, this is only 1 to 4 units. Once you get over 4 units, it's considered commercial, and the 3% does not count. Under dispute resolution, by having your buyer and seller initial these paragraphs, they are agreeing to do mediation first, if there's a dispute, and then go to arbitration. Typically, mediation costs about $2,500 for each side, so you're looking at $5,000. And then arbitration obviously has more cost. An important item here, number 23, is selection of service providers. The broker does not guarantee the performance of any vendor, service, or product providers, which were referred to by the broker or selected by buyer or seller or other person. Buyer and seller may select any providers of their choosing. Under 30, under definitions, something that I always find important and I have to go back to look often is when you're counting the days for a contingency period. So you have an agent that's not down your throat to say, hey, your contingency period is up today. Well, it's up at 11:59 p.m. So you get the whole day for that contingency period. They can't force you at 5 o'clock to remove a contingency. So it basically takes you to the next day. And keep in mind that contingency periods start the day after the contract was signed. So if you have a 14-day inspection period, it'll be the 15th day after you sign the contract. If you have, if you're giving notice to somebody to perform, so if I have a 48-hour notice to perform in my contract, and today is Wednesday, and that date is Friday, you can give notice 48 hours ahead of time. You don't have to wait until Friday to give either side the notice to perform. You can do it within the time period that it's supposed to be. So here we have that the offer or counteroffer will come back to Michael Berlin and the company name. Always fill that in, please. We get down here to the agent. I believe his information isn't filling in because he's from a different MLS, but I have notes on it. Oh, 638. I typically put the agent's cell phone number in here because that's the best contact for all of us. If somebody else is looking at the contract like escrow and they need to get something, I'm going to go back and fill in his email. I don't have that handy. So down here where it says presentation of offer, you can request that the broker from the other side initial this and date this to say that he's presented the offer on X date. We don't have a lot of agents that are doing that, but it is recommended, and that way you can prove to your client that your offer was presented. There also can be a rejection of the offer where the seller you can ask that the seller initial that they rejected the offer on X date. Again, that assures that your client's offer was presented. And unfortunately, there's agents in our market that we have to be careful of because they hold offers. The buyer inspection advisory is something for your buyer to review. It addresses all the various items that a buyer should be considering when they're purchasing a home, various things that relate to inspections. Then we have the California Consumer Privacy Act advisory. Again, this was new as of December 19. It's government at its best, but it is something that you have to put with every offer. When you use DocuSign, it typically doesn't default to this. So you have to go in and add your client's name in the DocuSign program. I'm not sure why. It's a glitch that's in the system. Do I have any questions on what we've covered so far?
Hi, Mike. I have a quick question on, can you go into more detail about the California Consumer Privacy Act? I mean, what exactly is it?
I'll be very honest with you. I'm gonna have to read the form with you. Well, it says right here, it grants California residents certain rights in their private personal information that's collected by companies with whom they do business. Personal information is defined to broadly encompass non-public records information that could reasonably be linked directly or indirectly to you, including potentially photographs or sales information about your property. Some of your personal information will be collected and likely shared with others during the process of buying and selling real estate. Depending on the situation, you may have the right to opt out or to stop the transfer of your personal information to others and request that certain businesses delete your personal information altogether. Not all business you interact with are required to comply with the law, primarily just those who meet the criteria covered under Section 1798, etc. This is a good question, Lauren. I got to get more information on this.
Okay.
I think the next paragraph, it's important where you're talking about that you're submitting information to the MLS. Mm-hmm. So more than likely, a lot of this has dealt with that. But I will reach out to our attorney and really ask him to give me, like in a nutshell, what's a good explanation, and I'll get it out to everybody.
Thank you.
Sure.
Also, too, can you send me the information to the gentleman who's able to go through with the buyers as far as the inspection goes?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
The company name is Villa Home Inspection.
Okay, perfect.
And his name is Tony Escamilla, but I'll send it to you. He is actually a full-time inspector for the city of Pasadena, mm-hmm. for residents. And he does this is his side gig, but since COVID started, he only goes into the city a couple days a week. He's a general contractor, and he's been doing home inspections for, I'd say, a good 20 years. He's got a really nice system.
Yes, that's awesome. I know oftentimes I kind of forget, like you were stating, where the unseen areas, the attic and stuff like that, we forget to look at it once the buyer's inspection kind of takes place. And
he goes, I mean, he's gone out to the Inland Empire for me, other agents in the office. He's gone up to Lancaster. So he goes a pretty broad area. I'm sure he even goes out to Ventura. So he's really good with buyers. Sometimes a home inspector can be an alarmist and blow your deal. The good thing about Tony is he's got what I call a good bedside manner.
Oh, good. Okay.
Goes over issues. He doesn't blow them out of proportion. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it is an issue that's bad, we killed a deal earlier this year because the foundation was a mess. And, he's honest, but if it's a $15 fix, he'll tell you it's a $15 fix.
Okay.
So that's the nice thing about it. So the coronavirus addendum or amendment, this can be used with your offer, a counter offer, or it could be done after acceptance. I will tell you, you're probably not going to get a listing agent to accept this after acceptance, so you're better off putting it in with the offer. I just had it rejected for the first time by an offer I put in about 3 weeks ago. Otherwise, the agents that I've been giving this to have been accepting it. I would say the reason it got rejected was because the agent I'm dealing with on the other side is very experienced. And I would probably try to reject it too if I were the listing agent. But when I'm doing buyers, I am putting it in. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm doing it mainly in section 4. And I'm saying extension of time addendum for buyer to remove contingencies. I'm only asking for 10 or 15 days, just if we need it for loan and appraisal. Just because of where the lenders are today, they are super, super backed up, but purchases do come first before refis. So it's really more of an insurance. And then this clause 4B, is extension of time for buyer and seller to close escrow. So this is helpful for both if they have an issue, and it's got to be related to COVID. And so a loan extension or appraisal extension is definitely a COVID issue because lenders just aren't full staffed. So that could be a COVID issue. Then this clause, we're asking to extend it for 10 days. Now, here's where it gets sticky. If this clause is the one that an experienced agent on the listing side is probably not going to want, because if after the 10 days, this does allow the buyer or seller to cancel the agreement. So a good listing agent is probably going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in there and see if I can get it to go through. Those are the key ones on this form that I recommend. Now, to make one of these things happen, you then have to go to the NUCC. I'm going to click on the NUCC and it puts the form into our document. And what this is, notice of unforeseen coronavirus circumstance. So if you're going to try to use that 10-day extension, you're going to serve this form and say, the buyer had an issue. We're going to, now here, it could be loss of income and they have to cancel the job because something's happened with their job. I will tell you that lenders they have COVID overlays and they are checking employment right up to closing. I mean, literally the day you record, they are calling employers. So if your client is going to get laid off or et cetera, do not do it during escrow. The other thing could be that there is a notary delay, a lender delay. So this is where you would serve the form on the seller and say, this is why I need the 10 days. I've seen things in the office where COVID, confirmed cases of COVID, either postponed or canceled the sale. Again, that's where this form would come in because people in the home had COVID. Any questions on those two forms? That is the basics for a purchase agreement. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. If you have some topic that you would like to cover in our next class, please let me know. I can do that too.
I have a question, Mike.
Yep.
Can you please send email today's card form? Can you email it to me?
Sorry, the one that we just did?
Yes, please.
Sure.
On the chat, I already put my email address.
Oh, okay. I'm sure I've got it, but let me check. Thanks, I got it.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, if that's it for everybody, I'm going to sign off and tell you all to have a great day.
I'm sorry, I have one question.
Go ahead.
With regards to the PED form, we send that out. Say, for instance, we want to go and view the home with our client. What specific form is that? Does that get sent out?
Okay, let's do that. So I'm going over here to our form library,
Okay.
and you go to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So you can type in, so if you're showing homes, it's the PED-V. So that's a PED visitor entry. If you're showing rentals, it's another one. But so the PED-V is for showing homes.
Okay.
And we'll go into the form. So you're going to put your property address, and then you're going to fill in your client's name, buyer, client's name, buyer. Now it could be, I'm working with a dad and a son, and then the son's girlfriend is coming, but she's not a buyer. So we click other entrant for her. So you specify which role they have. Then under here, you're going to put your name, and you're going to click broker agent and put your DRE number. Then when you send it out for e-sign, all parties are going to initial here. Each buyer and you will sign here. And then down here it says broker agent for the buyer tenant. There will be a box here, and you don't have to have me initial it. You sign it, you initial it as the agent. And then you should name your PED form. I recommend naming your PED form. For example, if it was this one, I would say 2023 Maiden Lane, and then I put the last name Berlin, and then I would put August 26, 2020. That way, if you need to go back and find something that happened in the last 14 days because of a potential coronavirus issue, you can see the date that you went with the client to the property. And then also, if you get into escrow on a property, your transaction coordinator will need all the PEDs that you've used with that buyer for that property, because we do put it into the record, we put it into command. So when I, for example, go out to DocuSign it, I'm gonna show you what I would do just as a, so oh, this is treating this as a template. So I have to go back. So basically what I just did was modify this template agreement, I believe. Let's look at it. Yeah. So I'm going to copy this. This is purchase agreement template receipt. So that means if I go out and put in other offers for this client, I now have a template right here with all their information in it, but it's also going to show that property that I was just using. So that would have to be adjusted. But that's a great way if you've got a client you're doing a bunch of offers with. But I'm going to go back to the transactions now and show you something. If this computer works. Well, maybe not. So here, when you go into your zip forms, it lists all your transactions. I'm going to just grab a PED. See, I'm naming a PED. I'm working with this buyer, and I set up a separate file just for his PEDs. That way, they're all in my zip forms. If I need to go back to them, they're there. So you can see, for example, with this client, we looked at a property on Wren. We looked at a property on Kemper on August 23rd. We looked at Monte Bonito, and I should have the date there. We looked at Gates Place on August 25th. So that way, if something came up with me and worried about being exposed to coronavirus, I could then go back in and deal with the client. So we have the form all filled out like we just showed you. And we go to e-sign for DocuSign. I'm going to delete this. It'll default to the name of the document, but if you get used to using the abbreviations, Gate Place, PED, Ohanessian, August 25th, 2020. So now I've got it named. I'm going to grab him. I'm going to just do me. No, I'll do two people to show you. Close. So over here in signing order, it's better if you want everybody to sign it at once, do everybody the same number, 1, 1, 1, 1. If you need somebody to sign something before somebody else, then you would do 1, 2, 3, 4. But what happens when you do the numbers is sometimes it gets tied up because number 2 didn't do it and number 3 is waiting for it. So if you put all ones, it means that it'll go to everybody at once. And everybody could sign it at once and it'll all come back at once. So that's what I normally do in a normal transaction. So when you get into the DocuSign, you will then see what we had filled in before, the names and everything. But you have to go in and apply it. On this form, it doesn't automatically populate. So we go to Ryan, we're going to do initials. Then we're going to put Ryan down here. So he's going to be over to the right because I've got 2 people signing here. Then we're going to do date signed and so on and so forth. Then we would do myself. And what I also always do to save me from filing it is I go here to recipients, edit recipients, and I'm going to add my transaction coordinator. So she's going to automatically populate because once she's in your system, she's in your system. So there's her assistant, and you're going to click receives a copy. Then I'm going to add the TC. This saves you time later. Again, receives a copy. And you can even do that with the listing agent. So if I'm scheduling an appointment to go out to show this property, I'll put the listing agent in there too. Then it automatically goes out to them and I don't have to deal with it. Now you often have to follow up with them because sometimes if they don't acknowledge it right away, it could be stuck in their spam. So we're all set to go. Everybody's highlighted and then you just click send. I'm going to get rid of Ryan. If you haven't used DocuSign before, it's very simple and it's a great system. It's much easier to use than ZipLogic. And it's free to Keller Williams agents. It's part of our benefits. Date sign. And we're going to go up here and click send. So now it's saying, I've got a problem. I didn't assign any fields to Ryan. So it's asking me to send it without fields. Well, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to alarm him. But so it would go out to the parties sign it, and then it comes back. So now I'm just going to discard it because we don't need this. And that's it for today, unless you guys have any other questions.
Quick question, Mike, I'm sorry. If the agent and the buyer come today and they signed a PED form and they want to come back again 2-3 times, every time they come, they have to sign the PED form?
Yes, you're supposed to do it for every visit.
Okay.
And actually, I had a situation, our agent wanted to do another walkthrough for our Cardiff.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was necessary, but Aziz said that the co-agent said, well, they have to do another COVID because they want to go in the backyard. Just for going outside, do you have to do that? I didn't think so, but.
No, I wouldn't do one for somebody going in the backyard.
Okay, all right.
I mean, are one of you going to be there?
It happened yesterday. No, the seller's daughter was there. Neither one of us were there.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
No, we're just going to look in the backyard. I wouldn't worry about it.
yeah. Okay, cool. I just want to, yeah. So I'll let her know because it's, to me, I thought it was like an overkill, but anyway. Okay, so it's just always on the inside. If it's a courtyard, if you have to go through the house or go through the back door, the same thing. You have to get another PED.
Yeah, if you're going in the house, and if you've got an appraiser going in, you've got an inspector going in, they have to sign PEDs also.
Okay, yeah, I did that already. Okay, cool. All right, just
And then,
checking.
Mike, I'm sorry, the last question is for what P form needs to be filled out for apartments if I'm doing a lease or something like that?
Okay, so let's go back over there. Let me go into this. We'll go into COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Normally when you hover over, it'll tell you, there we go. What does that say?
PED V3.
No, that's not it. You know what? They have changed it.
Okay.
The PV is for
Both.
For both.
That's
Okay.
what I use.
So this coronavirus lease rental property, let's look at that one. Entry advisory. Let's check this. I think this one is for
Owner occupied. Oh, sorry.
So this one, I would use this one for, like, if you've got a, oh, wait a minute. This is personal line entry.
That one's for owner occupied. If the owner is going to be in the house and you're leasing it, see at the very top, because I've had to use that one before.
Well, no, but it's also tenant occupied. I think that this is owner or occupant person. So this would be if you're showing an apartment and there's an owner or a tenant living there. And it's also for repairs. If you've got a worker going in, you're not having the worker sign it here, but you're having the tenant acknowledge that somebody's coming in, or the landlord. That's what this is about.
Okay.
Okay. So the other form would be if you're showing apartments.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Get rid of it. Doesn't belong there. That's it then for today, everybody. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. All righty.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mike.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.